I'm going to work on a still life here. I've set one up for myself. See if I can get the camera on it. Set this up on my work table. There it is. It's basically 2 peppers, some bananas, and an upside down pot. I chose these items because they're good examples of planes. Bananas, when they're not ripe yet, have very defined planes on them, and the peppers do as well. I'm going to work off of a photograph because it's a little easier for me to angle my camera so you can see what I'm working from. And I'm going to do a couple of different methods. Basically, the most important thing I'm after here is to get the big shapes down and to really look for those planes, because that's what will make the drawing have its three-dimensional or volumed look. And I'm going to use, first of all, this broken off piece of graphite so that I can get the basic shapes down quickly. I have here sort of what I see as 3 groupings. There's the peppers up here, there's the piled up bananas down here, and then there's this shape in here. So I sort of see that as 3 different large shapes. So I'm going to get the peppers in, and then the pot, and bananas. And when I use a large instrument and go quickly, I'm more apt to assess those big shapes more quickly. That went down a little bit unevenly, but I have my trusty eraser here. Someone in class last time asked what that black thing I was using. This is actually my kneaded eraser, and this is the way it can be cleaned. And even when it looks very dark, it will still take up pencil markings on the paper. So I have some funny lines in here I don't like very much, so I'm just going to take those out. Working on my tablet, the tablet might be a little uneven, and that's how that happened. So now that I have the basic shape down, I know this is the space that I want this composition to take up. So I don't have to, I can dive in on some detail and not worry that I'm going to run off the page. And I'm again looking for big shapes and for angles. This pepper angles down a little bit, this side angles in a little bit. So I can go ahead and define these edges watching how they curve into each other. And I'm doing it right over this tone I laid down. And then I'm just going to erase a little bit so that I can see those planes a little bit better and not get lost in as to where they are. I'll put down a little more tone there because the whole side of that pepper is dark, and I'll want to come back in and define that a little bit better. But for right now, I'm just going to get those edges down so that I know where I'm going. And if I'm off a little bit, I can always come back with my trusty eraser. Whoops, my trusty eraser. For instance, I have some tone out here outside the images, so I'm just going to take that away. So I'm drawing as much with my eraser as I am with my pencil. So that's how I would begin, one way I should say, one way to begin graphite drawing of this image. Here's one I started earlier, and once I got down those big shapes, I went in and continued to get the edges. Then I went in and continued to define the planes. For instance, I got in this whole side of the pepper is dark. And then we have some tone on the top of this banana. We have some little shadows in between here where the bananas overlap. So I'll continue to define those. And there's a little shadow here on the side of the pot. So I can go ahead and define that. But the whole side of this pot is dark as well. Now here I'm using a sort of rough crosshatch. I'm not lifting the paper. I'm not one of those really clean crosshatched people like this, which some people are very good at. I'm not. If I do crosshatch at all, I'm likely to do a continuous crosshatch going one way and then going back in to darken it. So I would just continue around and define as much as I wanted to define. Now if I wanted to do color, one way to do that would be to go in with broken off crayons and do sort of the same thing. Start with an orange here because it's going to show up. I have a broken off crayon here. And again, I'm going to just make big shapes here to figure out where I'm going. There's the pot, and I think I'll take yellow for the banana here, just to define those areas so that I can get the large shape on the paper. And then when I go in to do my detail, I won't have to worry about running out of room. And I think I would begin to define this, even though this pepper is red, I'll begin to define it with orange, and I can always overlay the red. And then I can go in with a colored pencil and even further define those edges. And when I'm ready, the colored pencil will go right over the crayon. Again, I'm getting that whole plane defined there. I can go in and make distinctions about the darkest parts. In here, for instance, I'd likely go in with a blue or a purple to really deepen that up a little bit, since that's the darkest part. So again, I would work my way around with as much detail as I want to. Another way to start would be a linear way, which would be, again, getting the big shapes. So I'm using a pencil here, and I'm going lightly because I know my first linear assessment here is going to have some inaccuracies that I won't be happy with. Sometimes it doesn't matter. It depends upon what your goal is, but I'm going in to get these large shapes. And again, if my proportions are not exactly accurate, I've gone lightly enough here that I can take it up with my trusty eraser here and make changes if I need to. And I would get down the big shapes here before I would begin to put any detail in, because what really gives a drawing power, in my humble opinion, is these nice big shapes. And then the detail that you hang on them make even more sense. So that's a third way to start.